Hey ladies and gentlemen, this is Miss Humbert here, and today we're going to be doing Unit 6 Notes 2. So we are going to talk about exponential functions. Okay, so basically today we want you to be able to graph and interpret exponential functions. So here's what an exponential function is. Y is equal to a to the x power. Couple key things you need to know. A has to be greater than 0, and a is not 1. If a is not 1, then we're just going to be taking 1 and raising it to different powers. Well, 1 to any power is just going to be 1. So that's not going to be exponential, which is why a has to be either greater than 1 or not 1. But it can be between 0 and 1. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this first one here. Okay, so what we want to do is we just kind of want to plug in values for x. So typically when our a is greater than 1, what I usually do is I pick values for x that are 0, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I pick values 0 through 5, okay? So now I'm going to go ahead and do that. So in my calculator, I'm going to do 4, and then to raise something to an exponent, you have a key on your calculator that looks like that. It's called the caret key. So we're going to do 4 to the 0 power. For this unit, it's going to be really important that you find one calculator and stick to it so you make sure you know how to use it, okay? So then 4 to the 0 power is just 1. 4 to the first power is 4. 4 to the second power, so 4 times 4 is 16. 4 to the third power, well, that's 4 times 4 times 4, that's 64. Then 4 to the fourth power is 256. And then finally, 4 to the fifth power is 1024. So now we're going to go ahead and graph this. So we're going over 0 up 1. So that's going to be right here. Over 1 up 4, that's going to be right there. Over 2 up 16, that's going to go to here. So now over 3 up 64, well, that's going to be off my graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly connect these, but I don't want to cross over to 3 until I'm off my graph. So you'll notice that right there, we don't cross over to 3. All right, so that's my graph. My y-intercept is whenever x is equal to 0. So then my y-intercept is going to be 1 because that's the y value when x is equal to 0. Next, let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 2. So for number 2, I'm going to do the same values that I chose before. So I'm going to do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so then I'm basically going to, in my calculator, do 3, type in the caret key to the first power. So, or to the 0 power, sorry. Anything to the 0 power, if you think back to Unit 3, anything to the 0 power is always 1. 3 to the first power is 3. 3 squared is 9. 3 to the third power is 27. So I always suggest that students type this in along with me so that they make sure they're doing it correctly. 3 to the fourth power is 81, and 3 to the fifth power is 243, and that looks like a y. Okay, so I'm going to go over 0 up 1, over 1 up 3, over 2 up 9, and then over 3 up 27, that's not going to be on the graph. So I'm going to make sure that it doesn't cross 3 before I reach the top of my graph. Last but not least, my y-intercept is when my x is equal to 0, so my y-intercept is 1. Now, let's take a look at number 4. So now we have something on the outside of it that doesn't really change how we're going to do things. So I'm still going to pick the same values, except now in my calculator, I'm going to do 4 times, that's going to be my times key, 4 times 2, and I do suggest you put that in parentheses in your calculator, and then I'm going to type the caret key, and then to the 0 power. So first thing I want to do, if you're doing this in your head, is 2 to the 0 power. Well, 2 to the 0 power is 1. 4 times 1 is 4. Next, I have 4 times 2 to the first power. Well, 2 to the first power is just 2, and 2 times 4 is 8. And then I'm going to have 2 to the second power. So 2 to the second power is 4, and then I need to multiply it times the 4 that's out here, so that's going to be 16. 4 to the third power times 4 is 32. Okay, 2 to the fourth power times 4 is 64. 2 to the 5th power times 4 is 128. Again, it's always a good idea to be doing this in your calculator along with me to make sure you're doing it correctly. So I'm going over 0 up 4 and plotting that point, over 1 up 8 and plotting that point, over 2, 16 and plotting that point. So those are all the points that I can fit on the graph, so I'm just going to do that amount right there. Okay, so then that's my final answer for the graph. My y-intercept is my y value when x is 0, so my y-intercept is going to be 4. Now let's take a look at number 3. Okay, so number 3, I noticed that I have a number less than 1 in there. This is kind of a weird thing when I do. You could still do 0 through 5 for your x values, but when this number is less than 1, or sorry, in between 1 and 0, I like to start at a negative 1, then do 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so what we're going to do then is 6 times 1/3, and then we're going to start by raising it to the negative 1. Well, 1/3 to the negative 1 is really just going to be 3. So 6 times 3 is 18. Then 6 times 1/3 to the 0 power, that's the same as 6 times 1, so that's just going to be 6. So 1/3 to the first power is just 1/3. Well, 6 times 1/3 is the same as 6 divided by 3, so that's 2. And then here you're going to get 0.67. And then you're going to get 0.22. And then you're going to get 0.07. Okay, so then we're going to go left 1 and up 18. So that's going to be right there. Over 0, up 6, that'll be right there. So really what we're doing is we're cutting things down. So we're dividing it by 3 every single time we go down. So then over 1, up 2. Over 2 up 0.67, so that's going to be just below 1, and then really between these we're approaching 1. So something to notice when your graph is going down like this, we never want it to actually cross this x-axis. You want to make sure it comes down and just kind of sits on top of that x-axis. So your y-intercept is whenever your x is equal to 0, so our y-intercept then is going to be 6. Next, let's now take a look at number 5. So for number 5, what we're going to do is a translation. So I see how that 3 is being added. So if you remember on number 4, I just said that it'll have to sit on the x-axis. Okay, well, because we're adding 3, instead of sitting on the x-axis, it's actually going to sit at the line y equals 3. So what I like to do is just draw a horizontal dotted line there to remember that that's kind of my line that I can't cross, okay? So then, since it's a 2 in my parenthesis, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So 2 to the 0 power is 1. 1 plus 3 is 4. 2 to the first power is 2, plus 3 is 5. 2 to the second power is 4, plus 3 is 7. 2 to the third power is 8, plus 3 is 11. 2 to the fourth power is 16, plus 3 is 19. And lastly, 2 to the fifth power is 32, plus 3 is 35. So now let's go ahead and graph what we can. So we're going over 0, up 4. And then we're going over 1, up 5, over 2, up 7, over 3, up 11, over 4, up 19, and then 5 is going to be off the graph. So even with my tail down on that end right there, I'm making sure that it doesn't cross this new line that I just drew, okay? So you want to make sure that it kind of comes down and sits on that line. You don't want to actually cross it. So my y-intercept is whenever my x is equal to 0, so that's going to be 4. Now, let's take a look at number 6 here, and then we'll be done with this part of the video, okay? So for number 6, we're going to go ahead, since this is 0.5 and it's between 0 and 1, I'm going to use negative 1 here, and then 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so then what I want to do is plug in my values. Well, 0.5 to the negative 1 power, well, that's the same as 2. 2 times 2 is 4, minus 1 is 3. Again, you can be typing this into your calculator. You could even be typing it like this all at once, and then that should work. If it's not working for some reason, let me take a look at how you're entering it in, but the key is that you're following along with me and practicing it yourself. So 2 times 0.5 to the 0x, that's going to be 2 minus 1 is 1. Here we're going to get 0. And then here we're going to get a negative 0.5. Here we're going to get a negative 0.75, and here we're going to get a negative 0.875. So, since I'm subtracting 1 here, that's my vertical translation. So that means that when I go and draw this, it needs to sit on that negative 1 line. It cannot pass it, okay? So we're going left negative 1 and up 3. So I'm going to go ahead and cross that point. Over 0, up 1. That's going to be here. Over 1, up 0. And then the rest of these are just going to be between 0 and negative 1, getting closer and closer and closer to that negative 1 line. Again, we're never going to cross it. We're just going to shoot down and kind of sit on top of it. So then whenever your x is 0, your y value is your y-intercept. So here my y-intercept is 1. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here. I want you to go onto your practice sheet and try the problems up through the graphing. So I believe if you look at that through the graphing, I'm not sure what number it is, but we'll work on the word problems in the second part of this video. Thanks for listening.